Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Foust, proud Superintendent of Schools of Northwest ISD. I'm excited to share with you a fall 2024 update about Northwest ISD and our upcoming VATRE election. On our first slide, we want to talk to you about the history of the school district. Northwest ISD was founded in 1949, and we're celebrating our 75th year anniversary. The four school districts that came together to form the school district were Haslet Public School, Justin Public School, Rome Public School, and Roanoke Public School. Our forefathers really wanted to bring together their resources and pool their resources for our students so they could have better programming offerings. So they joined together back in 1949 to form Northwest ISD. Originally, our school district had just over 700 students in the district. About 50 years later, we were all the way up to 5,350 students and 10 schools in the year 2000. But fast forward to 2024, and we have reached just over 32,000 students and 35 campuses. It's an incredible amount of growth, particularly in the last 20 years for our school district. And the predictions going forward, or projections going forward, we will surpass 40,000. Currently, the district is about 33% built out at 32,000 students. So imagine 30, 40, or 50 years into the future, the size of Northwest ISD. Again, it is a fast growth school district, and we're experiencing that growth. We're at the top of the list for fastest growing school districts in terms of housing in the North Texas area. You may or may not know that Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is also the fastest growing community or set of communities in the United States. So again, we're at the top of the list of the DFW area as far as housing starts and closings, and particularly vacant developed lots, that VDO column of 4,000 vacant developed lots, and also our future lots of 38,000 plus. It is an incredible pace that we're currently experiencing as additional residential homes come into our area, as well as additional commercial. So a couple of recent projects that you may or may not be familiar with: a replacement school for Gene Pike Middle School opened this fall in August. Also, we opened our 23rd elementary school, which is Alan and Andrea Parent Elementary. Northwest High School, you may know, particularly our students and our staff that are living through a complete renovation. They're doing an incredible job being patient and flexible and just rolling with the punches. But Northwest High School is in a major renovation as we speak. The STEM section is open, and we continue to add pieces and as we complete portions of the project. That project will complete sometime in 2026. I mentioned the 23rd elementary school that opened. We currently have 7 middle schools, 4 high schools, a legacy learning center. And when I say 4 high schools, 3 comprehensive high schools that are all 6A and renovations expanding their core spaces to 6A. And then we can't forget our Steele Early College High School, again, the Legacy Learning Center and our Special Programs Center. So in the Bond 2023 program, all 3 propositions passed by our community. We have 5 elementary schools. 2 of those are replacement elementary schools. Those projects are currently underway. So Justin Elementary, as well as Prairie View Elementary, are being constructed, moving from buildings that will host 650 students to buildings that are state-of-the-art that will host 850 students. Those 2 projects will open in the fall of 2025. And additional elementary schools are in that 2023 bond, as well as middle school number 8, high school number 4, and 4 early childhood centers. Just to give you a timeline, middle school number 8 is planned to open in the fall of 2026, and comprehensive high school number 4 will plan to open in the fall of 2027. The first early childhood center will plan to open in the fall of 2026, and then the 2, 3, and 4 will proceed afterwards. We are continuing to add about 1,200 students per year. We expect that pace to continue, so we need those facilities to have seats for our students as we grow. I'd like to transition from the fall update of our bond program and what's happening with our growth in Northwest ISD to a voter-approved tax rate election that our Board of Trustees recently called that will be on the November ballot. So what is the status of school funding in the state of Texas? You probably have heard on the news or read somewhere on the internet about districts all across the state of Texas adopting budget deficits. We have 76 school districts in the Region 11 area which is the Dallas-Fort Worth, really Fort Worth area of the state. Of those 76 districts, 60% of them in our area have passed budget deficits this budget cycle. So we also are taking part in that. We adopted a budget last budget cycle of $2.9 million deficit. This budget cycle for 24-25, we adopted a budget deficit of $15.8 million. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Again, the headlines are across the state. It's not just North Texas. In Houston, there was a district, one of the largest districts in the state, adopted a deficit budget of more than $100 million. Central Texas, all across the state, districts are making cuts in order to try to make ends meet and give teachers salary raises. So what is a VATRE? A VATRE is a voter-approved tax rate election. It is the construction that the state of Texas put together for school districts when they want to ask their community for additional revenue. It is the only way that we can increase our maintenance and operations tax revenue after a certain number of pennies have been gathered. We have to go to the voters and say, can we increase our maintenance and operation tax rate? Maintenance and operation tax rate, or these pennies that would be subject to the VATRE election, can only be used for daily operations. We're often asked, you just had a $2 billion bond program, can you use some of that money for maintenance and operations? No, it's actually against the law to use bond proceeds or interest and sinking proceeds for maintenance operations, for daily operations. So we're not able to do that. They're two separate buckets. I'll share more with you in a few moments about that. So the primary goal in the voter-approved tax rate election is twofold. We want to use the additional revenue that would be gained from an increase in our maintenance and operations tax rate to maintain our student programs, particularly our student-to-teacher class size ratio and the wide breadth of programs that we offer our students. And we also want to continue to focus on increasing our salaries and remain regionally competitive, recruiting the best possible teachers, providing them the best, our faculty and staff with the best possible salaries that we can offer. In Northwest ISD, folks often say, is there a way for you in your district to cut the fluff out of the budget and save money? Absolutely, there is some room for that, but most folks don't realize that the vast majority of school district budgets in Texas are people-driven. So 80% of our budget is payroll, or people. That's our salaries and benefits. Under contracted services, you see that 11% of the budget is there, but of those contracted services, several of those are also people. Some of our outsourced services, like our custodial and our food service maintenance company, those are also people. When you add in the percentage that's in that contracted services into payroll, it's somewhere between 84 and 87% of our annual budget is human beings that serve students at some portion during the school day. So we are a people-driven business. If we are cutting our budgets in order to close down deficits, we're generally cutting people and programs, but mostly people in order to make a difference in the budget. Our total teachers to staff ratio is 59.6 in Northwest ISD. The state average is 48.7, so we're well above the state average of teachers to total staff. What makes up that percentage of the other 40%? It's our bus drivers, as we mentioned. It's our custodial workers, our nurses, our librarians, our paraprofessionals that serve in special ed programs, diagnosticians, licensed school psychologists, just all the different people that serve a student throughout the school day. So people also ask us, if the VATRE doesn't pass, what will you do? I don't have a perfect answer for what we would do right now. It's something we would absolutely have to study, but what we can share with you is what districts around us have been doing for the last couple of years. You see, Northwest ISD is in a great position, and I know that sounds ironic when you say we have a $15.8 million deficit this budget cycle, but because we're fast growth, we're adding students, we've also been adding revenue, and we're in a better position than many of the districts around us. What other districts around us have been doing for the last couple of years is freezing administration hiring, freezing all hiring, freezing raises for staff or faculty and staff, sometimes including freezing raises for teachers, modifying their class size ratios where they're adding 2 more students per class or 3 or 4 more students per class, making some decisions about low enrollment elective courses and programs that they offer that don't serve very many kids but are expensive programs, and sometimes reducing or cutting those programs out of their school districts. Busing qualifications, moving from 2 miles to 3 miles to 4 miles to qualify for busing to save money on transportation, as well as some districts have gone to pay to play for fine arts and athletics. What exactly Northwest ISD would do is not certain. We do know, as I mentioned, because we're staff driven as an organization, we would definitely look at the class size ratios. One of the numbers that we've discussed or considered would be adding somewhere between 2 and 4 additional students per class. So if you think about K through 4, where our max is capped at 22, we would likely move that cap to something like 26 students per classroom. For secondary, you would move somewhere from 28 to 32 students. Again, we don't have the answers there yet, but those are all things that we would be exploring, like the neighbors around us. So I mentioned earlier about 2 buckets in our maintenance and operations tax rate and our interest in seeking tax rate. They are 2 different things that make up our total tax rate. What the district is specifically asking for in the VATRE election is 3 additional pennies added to the maintenance and operation tax rate, which would move our tax rate, or the proposed tax rate, to 69.69 cents. Our interest in sinking tax rate is currently 42.1 or 42 and a tenth of a penny. We're not proposing any changes to that. The VATRE election, the voter approved tax rate election, is only about adding 3 additional pennies to the maintenance and operation tax rate. How does that affect the average homeowner in our community? The average home price is somewhere around $500,000. At $500,000 per home, with the $100,000 homestead exemption applied, 3 additional pennies on the M&O tax rate would be $120 more on the tax bill annually for the average homeowner. So it's really important that I share with you the concept of recapture as it applies to the VATRE election that we're providing. The glass cup on the far left of the screen shows you the differentiation between the amount that the state funds a school district and the amount local property taxes fund a school district. There are 2 primary types of school districts in the state of Texas: property poor and property wealthy districts. We are a property wealthy district. I'll tell you more in a second. Property poor districts are represented by the cup on the far left that has a great deal of state funding or funding that's coming from the state, and a smaller amount of local taxes. Because their property values are not significant, or they have more rooftops than commercial, they don't raise as much local revenue on local property tax, so the state funds much more of the burden for those school districts. Northwest ISD is a property wealthy district, as I said. We're the cup on the far right. We bring in property value that exceeds what the state says we should have per student. So over the last few years, we've sent more than $50 million back to the state in what's called recapture. Our cup doesn't really stay full or runneth over. Whenever we have too much revenue, the state says, you send those dollars back. They decrease the amount of funding that the state provides. And again, you've heard of it called Robin Hood. We send that back to the state in what's called recapture. So that's important, because on the next slide, you'll see that those 3 pennies that are asked for through this VATRE election are what's called golden pennies. Those are not subject to recapture. They would not be subject to be reclaimed by the state if our revenue grew. That means local tax dollars stay local to be used in Northwest ISD and in your community schools. So I just wanted to point out on the VATRE election proposed for November 2024, those 3 pennies that would be added to the M&O tax rate are not subject to recapture. So folks ask us, why are we in a budget deficit? Is it mismanagement of money? How did we get into this position? As I mentioned earlier, we're one of the fastest growing districts in the state. Because of that, we've had additional students and additional revenue, and we've been fiscally conservative with our money over the years, and yet we find ourselves in this position. The basic allotment hasn't changed since 2019, $6,160. However, inflation and the inflationary pressures on our expenses and costs for running a school district have exceeded 20%. What you see here, I just wanted to share a couple of the biggest pieces here that have affected the budget. You see the growth positions of $8.1 million, which are additional teachers to serve the students that we've added, but also additional services to wrap around service for all of our students. The 2% midpoint raise was $5.8 million in this budget cycle, not nearly enough a raise to meet the inflationary pressures that our staff are under, but that's what we were able to do this cycle, again, taking us a little bit further into deficit. And the bottom of that chart, you also see second staffing, and in parentheses, SPED, which means special education. Our special ed student population is rapidly outpacing our general ed population as far as growth goes. We added more than $2.5 million in staff for some very specific special ed positions. There are also special ed positions in that growth budget of 8.1. Those are the big drivers for this budget cycle. We don't always have that significant amount of second staffing, but they are drivers for this cycle, and we wanted to share that with you. Also on the next slide, unfunded mandates. So I mentioned the SPED growth. TEA recently published that special education is underfunded in the state of Texas by approximately $1.5 billion. So we're carrying that load of underfunding at this time. Also, you may know full day pre-K. That program for us has been growing pretty significantly. Just a handful of years ago, we had less than 500 students. This year, we believe we're going to top 1,100 students in the full day pre-K funding or program, but we are only funded half day for full day pre-K. It's not required by law until the fall of 2026. We wanted to get ahead of that or be in advance of that because it's what's good for students and preparing them for kindergarten. And so that expense is an additional $1.2 million. Our choice, but the right thing to do for kids. Also, you may know about the security mandates. We did receive some funding for the security mandates, $15,000 per campus, and then an additional 24 cents, I can't remember the exact number, but a few more pennies per student per campus. Didn't quite meet the need. We spent $1.6 million on additional armed guards for our elementary schools. We received about $700 in revenue, so again, an underfunded mandate. And I mentioned recapture in excess of $50 million, $52.8 million to be precise, over the last 4 years. So how do we stack up with our current tax rate, and if the maintenance and operations increase through the VATRE passes, where would we be? Currently, we're at the floor, the lowest possible level. We've been compressed to the floor on an M&O tax rate. You may or may not know the state assigns our M&O tax rate ever since 2019 in House Bill 3. There is a floor there. We've been compressed because we've been growing so rapidly in the number of rooftops and the amount of commercial and the value of those things. We're at the lowest possible level of 0.6692. If the VATRE passes in November, we'll move up ahead of Decatur, Boyd, Carroll, and Denton, and be right underneath Argyle and Grapevine ISD. Both of those districts, by the way, also have VATRE elections on the November ballot, but that 0.6969 would be just below Argyle ISD. So that's how we would move. And again, we want to have full transparency with what's being asked and how we stack up. One of the things I wanted to mention is these 3 pennies that are golden pennies, local tax dollars remaining local. Many districts have gone out for additional pennies beyond those golden pennies. They've asked for what's called copper pennies, where the community keeps a portion, somewhere around 60% of the revenue from those taxes, but 40% of the revenue is subject to recapture. So it goes back to the state. I'll use Birdville ISD as an example, Fort Worth ISD. Several of those districts above us that have the higher M&O tax rates, they've gone out for all of the golden and all of the copper pennies, all 17 pennies that they can ask for. Again, we're a very conservative district fiscally, so the ask in this November election is the 3 additional maintenance and operation pennies that are not subject to recapture. So here's what the total tax rate would be if the VATRE is successful at the ballot in November. It's $1.11 and 0.79. How does that affect our homeowners? Again, the average home value at $500,000 minus the homestead exemption would be a taxable value of $400,000. It equates to approximately $120 annually. To be clear and transparent, that's every year from there on out. We would have that additional revenue or that additional $120. Also, to be clear and transparent, as your values go up, that affects the amount of taxes you pay. We do not control values on home. We only control the INS tax rate. The state assigns our M&O tax rate. So also in an effort of transparency. We want our homeowners to be able to know how this will impact them. So we have a handy dandy tax rate calculator, or how this will affect you. You slide that bar if you go to our VATRE website, move it to the amount before the homestead exemption. It assumes the 100,000 homestead exemption, and it'll calculate that annual increase to your tax rate. That's all we have right now for the VATRE presentation and our fall update. Please learn more and be informed about this voter-approved tax rate election. If you go to nisdtx.org/VATRE, we have a number of resources there. It's really important to us that we share factual information with you. It is against the law for our school district or employees during work time or using work resources to advocate for or against a ballot measure or a candidate. So we're going to maintain our ethics and avoid that, but we can provide information to you and answer any questions that you may have. We also have an opportunity for you to ask questions, so please gather information as you get ready to go to the polls. As I know you're all good citizens and you want to plug in and engage in all the elections this November. We think we're going to have a historic turnout, so please go to our website and gather additional information. Thank you for your time in watching this presentation, and let's have a great rest of the school year.